When someone who is not into watches hears the word quartz, they probably think of a cheap, reliable watch that they never have to worry about and are happy to have them as they are easy to manage by only having to change batteries every few years and are even cheap to replace. But when it comes to watch enthusiasts, many dislike a quartz movement. Some might say it's because a quartz watch does not have a soul and that they can't feel a connection as they do with a mechanical watch. Also, the quartz crisis during the 70s and early 80s, when cheap quartz watches flooded the market, almost destroyed the mechanical watch industry. Even now, majority of the people around the world use quartz watches, and many come from fashion brands that just put cheap quartz movements into their watches and sell for a high margin. Even though most of the watch community despises quartz, there are some brands that have innovative quartz movements that the watch community very much respects, like the Grand Seiko 9F movement or their Spring Drive movement that uses a quartz crystal but no battery and gets its power from a rotor like a mechanical watch. That movement in a sense is a fusion between quartz and an automatic movement. But Seiko has been around forever and has all the resources it needs to come up with such technical quartz movements. But the quartz watch we are looking at today comes from an independent that was established just before the start of the 21st century, but only recently has become a brand that any collector would love to have. I'm of course talking about FP Journe. Now, FP Journe as a brand might not be as old and experienced as Seiko, but what they have done here with the Elegante is something truly special and genius. I would like to thank Shan for lending me this watch that made this video possible. Before we go any further, we should get one thing out of the way. Yes, this Elegante 40mm was FP Journe's first ladies watch, but has been a huge hit with men as well. You see, Elegante does come in a larger case size of 48mm, but for any man with a wrist smaller than 6.5 inches, the 40mm would be better suited. It really is a unisex watch, and when I say 40mm and 48mm, it's really the measurement from lug to lug. But before we talk about the case and dial, let's first look at the movement in more detail. This quartz movement was designed by Journe himself and produced in collaboration with a partner in Switzerland. It is probably one of the most high-end quartz movement produced today. The movement inside of the Elegante watches is known as the caliber 1210 and is an electromechanical system with some clever features as well as the high level of FP Journe quality and tension. 8 years of development was necessary for this innovative movement to come to life. The movement is visible through the display caseback and it succeeds at looking good. Each 1210 begins with an 18-karat rose gold movement plate. FP Journe mostly uses 18-karat rose gold versus brass for all his movement plates and bridges, and there is no exception here. All the movement parts except the electronics are produced in-house in Geneva. The electronics are totally custom and even offer an elegant design. On the movement there is a small heart which is placed right over the location of the controlling microprocessor. Aside from the quartz module and related components, the pieces are very traditional in FP Journe design. At 4 o'clock on the dial, there is a small window that appears to contain a tiny automatic rotor. This in fact is a motion sensor. If the rotor does not move for about 30-40 minutes, then the watch goes into a sleeping or power saving mode. During the power saving mode, the watch continues to measure time, but the mechanical elements like the gear train, rotors and hands stop moving. This is designed to maximize battery life, and when the watch is picked up once again, the hands choose the shortest path to return to indicate the current time. According to FP Journe, the Elegante's battery would last for 8 to 10 years with daily use. Having said that, on the standby mode, without having the hands move, a single battery can last up to 18 years. That is quite impressive and much more than what some of the Japanese watches from Seiko and Citizen offer that have similar features. It's true that having a standby function to extend battery life is not new. Seiko introduced such a function with the Kinetic Auto Relay in 1998, but FP Journe is the first one to incorporate it into a high-end quartz watch in addition to improving upon it. The caliber 1210 can easily be categorized as a high-end quartz movement. It is handmade using a large assortment of parts individually produced by the same people who bring you some of the most impressive mechanical watches in the world. This Elegante version comes in a flat tortu case featuring angled corners. The case is 35mm wide and 40mm lug to lug and is 7.35mm thick. This particular watch is the titanium version, and there are other case options like the super light Titanite, gold or platinum. The bigger sized Elegante that measures in at 40mm wide and 48mm lug to lug comes in titanium. Despite being an entry-level watch, the Elegante has a detailed case. The alternating brushed and polished surfaces is something missing from the traditional FP Journe watches that have entirely polished cases. All versions of the Elegante watch come with rubber straps with a titanium clasp that looks and feels very luxurious. The strap is very comfortable and probably is the softest rubber strap I have handled. The watch is water resistant up to 30 meters and has a screw down crown, which is the classic Journe crown found on their mechanical watches as well. The crown feels buttery smooth when setting the time. The Elegante is very light and super comfortable on the wrist and could easily spend the most amount of time on your wrist compared to other watches in a collection. The Elegante features a glossy white dial that might appear to be enamel or porcelain, but the entire dial is luminous and entirely covered in superluminova. It does quite the opposite of most watches. Most watches have their hands and numerals that have lume on it, but Journe opted to flip the idea by making the entire dial shine except the numerals, scales, signature and hands that appear in contrast. It is so unusual and original, and I for one love it. The titanium hands appear black at first glance, but the blue is revealed when the light hits at an angle. Despite the unusual case shape and movement, the watch is unmistakably FP Journe. Its font, hands and screws sticking very much to the brand's style. Being a quartz watch, the Elegante does lack the technical character of its mechanical counterparts, even if it's smart and extremely well made, especially given that FP Journe is a watchmaker well known for its great mechanical watches. So is the Elegante just an expensive gimmick? Not at all. FP Journe set his sights on creating the most elaborate and advanced high-end quartz watch in the market. Every single detail of this timepiece is luxurious, similar to the other watches from the manufacturer. It presents exceptionally good value for money if one can only accept its quartz-powered caliber. Personally, I could never get myself to buy a quartz watch that costs around $15,000. But that is just my personal choice, and it definitely doesn't take away from the fact that this watch is worth the amount. And some people do see the value, and rightly so. Just like my mate Shan, who bought this watch and is absolutely in love with it. But let me know in the comments down below, would you buy a quartz watch that costs $15,000, or would you rather buy an automatic watch for the same amount? If you like this video, do smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also follow me on Instagram at WineItOnTheMove. Until next time.